In this video, we are going to look at another way of comparing two fractions, and I call it the more than or less than a landmark fraction. So the key in this is landmark fraction. So let's think about what is a landmark fraction, and I would say fractions like half, 1 are landmark fractions for sure, and then even fractions like 1/4, 1/3, or even 3/4 could be landmark fractions. So now what exactly does it mean to compare two fractions with a landmark fraction? So let's take an example. For example, let's compare 2/5 and 5/8. Yep. So let me try and change the color. 2/5 and 5/8. Now in this case, we are going to compare these two fractions with half. So let me write it here. Compare with half. So if I draw 2/5, 2/5 are not that easy to draw. Fifths are not that easy to draw. But the way I draw them is I split them into two unequal parts, and then this is 2 parts, and then this is 3 parts. So 2/5 would be this and this. Now in case of 5/8, let's look at this. 5/8 would be, again, eighths would be half, half of half, and there you go, 5/8. Yep, and let me shade in 5/8. So what was the purpose of drawing all this and saying, okay, how am I going to compare these two? They're not of the same size, but I'm going to use half to compare them with. So what is half of this whole? Yeah. Half of this whole is, I'm going to just split it into half, and this is half of this whole. Yeah, and it kind of makes sense. There's 2.5 pieces on this side, 2.5 pieces on this side, so this is a half. Now you see in this case, 2/5 is less than half. Yeah. Now let's try and split this into half, this whole, and I would split it this way. Yeah. Oh, that was bad. So you notice how, okay, let me try again. Let's split it this way. Okay. Yeah. So you notice how in 5/8, 5/8 is more than half. Yeah. And in this case, 2/5 was less than half. So I'm not comparing them to each other. I'm comparing them with half, and I find that 5/8 is actually more than half. And so obviously 5/8 has to be the larger fraction. Now let's take the case where we compare with 1. So let's write here, compare with 1. And I'm going to take the case of, say, my favorite, 3/4, and another fraction, let's say 4/3. Yeah. So let's try and draw 3/4. So I take a whole, I split it into 4 parts because this denominator tells me how many parts I should split it into, and the numerator tells me how many parts I want. So I'm looking at 3/4. So you notice how I've split the whole into 4 parts, and I've taken up 3, and so 3/4 is not even equal, is less than a whole. So now let's look at 4/3. Now some people think 4/3 is like, doesn't look very proper, it doesn't look like a fraction. And that's true, it's actually called an improper fraction. And this 3 tells me that the whole needs to be split into 3 parts. So I'm going to split it into, divide it into 3 parts. Yeah? And I need 4 of these 3 parts. I've got 1, 2, 3. And I notice that I've filled up the whole, and I need some more parts. So I'm actually going to need 1 more whole. I will split it into, divide it into 3 parts, and I need 1 more part. So you notice here that I've got these thirds, and I have 4 of these thirds, and so 4/3 is more than a whole, while 3/4 is actually less than a whole, and therefore obviously 4/3 is the larger fraction. So I really like this way of comparing fractions because it's an easy and really effective way of comparing fractions without doing too much work.